So Steve Smith, welcome to Tell a Friend.
Good to be here.
Now, despite lockdown easing, we are still very much in the midst of a global pandemic, and we're already feeling the effects of that pandemic. Could you talk to me about how Exeter University has risen to the challenges that have been brought about by this health crisis?
Well, there's a number of ways. I mean, the really interesting thing is, of course, there was no manual in order to go to it and say pandemics, what to do in the case of, we've had to learn a lot from scratch. I'd say basically the big thing we've learned is that the institution can move very quickly and do things. We've moved everything online, as you know. Assessments went really well this year. In fact, we've had fewer complaints than in a normal year, which is not what we expected. Professional staff have worked really hard with academics. Our relationship with the Guild has been fantastic. The Guild and the Students' Union in Penryn. We've learnt that working with them is absolutely mission critical, because you get the one thing you get, Bryan, is you get a lot of voices telling you what they want, and actually what you need is someone to discuss with. And the Guild has been fantastically supportive, and students actually, in the vast main number of students, have been really understanding and aware that it's not going to be easy in this situation. Then, of course, you also, as a matter of some pride, realise the contribution that both students and staff are making to the crisis. The number of medical students who graduated early, and the diagnostic radiography students who graduated early so they could go onto the front line, and also all the academic colleagues who are working on COVID. I've just come from a briefing where 3 of them have made presentations on the drug discovery work and their treatments. And so we're plugged into all of those things. We're one of the 10 institutions that is most involved in research into COVID. So for all of those reasons, that's gone well. I think what hasn't gone so well, I hadn't prepared really and mentally for the kind of mental effect, the toll on mental health of the people I work with. Because you're suddenly working from home, and there's no difference then between home life and work life. And therefore, I think people work ridiculous hours. Certainly the first 3 weeks of the crisis, a group of us worked every day, including Saturdays and Sundays, just trying to manage the community. So I think the big lesson is the community's adapted well. I think some of the potential downsides financially are just frightening. And that's worrying us a lot at the moment, how we deal with those. But the basic thing is, the community's come through very well, and the community has never been more established in its home base, working with the populations of Exeter, Devon and Cornwall. Incredible work with the local authorities, the health service, the police, all these organisations, transport the student base. But it's been a massive learning journey.
Have you been able to calculate the economic impact that it's had on our university?
Yeah, it's really well. So for this year, I think it's probably cost us nearly 30 million between March and now. 15 million in the return of student third term accommodation costs, 8 to 9 million in terms of the money we were investing in moving things online, and about 6 million involved in all the additional stuff we've had to do to make the campus safe. I mean, the health and safety testing, 120 buildings, there's an enormous amount that's had to go into that. So that's one thing. Next year, we're looking at a number of estimates, but we were expecting £103 million worth of international student fees next year. You can argue what's it going to be, but if you said half of that will go, that wouldn't be a bad estimate. And of course, governors have the ultimate authority of having to make sure the institution is financially sound. So they are going to come back with saying, well, what are you going to do if it's 100? So this year, okay, it's going to hit our surplus for this year that we're kind of legally required to make. But next year is the year we're worried about. And I suppose the ultimate issue, is it a 1-year problem, or are we in for several years of this? In which case, I think it's going to have a massive effect, not just on Exeter, but across the whole educational system.
Now, as you point out there, the recruitment of students in the upcoming year is a point of concern for some universities. And I've heard students, voice their concerns and their apprehensions about going into academia in a year full of such uncertainty. Do you sympathize with these students and their fears around the pandemic?
Yeah. Oh, so, yeah. I mean, they've had the most awful period to make these decisions in, and so for let's assume 18-year-olds for a second, but for 18-year-olds, they've had this spring with virtually no person-to-person teaching. Exams have been cancelled. Then they're going to university, and no one is quite sure what the university experience is going to be in the autumn. I mean, but 2 points. One, I think all the evidence is that students really want to go on campus next year. We've got a lot of data which is telling us. I mean, the UK is up on the number of students confirming their place compared to the same date last year. And secondly, we've as of today, we've got 499 more students who want to come this year than the same day last year. So unless there's a second wave that's massive, I think a lot of people feel that students will want to come. Of course, one other point, do they really want to stay at home? What are they going to do? Are they going to do gap years? Are they going to work? I mean, those options aren't as great. So the upshot is, we think they will come. The difficulty, of course, is we can't be sure as to what that year is going to look like. We've made a lot of work, done a lot of work on social distancing, on building design, on one-way systems, on air quality systems. We're doing all that and getting everything in. Everyone will get their personal protection. Everyone will get the hand sanitizer and thermometer. We'll test on entry to buildings. We'll do all that. But then that's only part of the student life. What about societies? What about guild activities? What about sport? So all of these things we're kind of concerned about because we're not sure the way that will go. It all depends on the second wave. And I think that's where Exeter, like every institution's in a difficult place. And for the students coming in, my gut feeling, and it's easy for me to say, I guess, my gut feeling is people should still go. The evidence of transmission amongst young people, as you know, is very, very low indeed. And I'm leading a group at the moment in UK meetings on what international students might have to do in terms of quarantine. So it's changing so quickly. And with the announcement of the countries, 59 countries that you can come to the UK from without having to quarantine, it's changing all the time. But there's no doubt, to your main point, that this is a really tough year.
Do you feel that universities are being supported by the government?
Yes, I do, actually. And when you compare what's happening here to some other countries, I was on the ministerial task force that has come up with the research sustainability plan announced last weekend. That's a plan to underwrite 80% of lost international student fee income. And as you know, international student fee income basically cross-subsidizes the research base. That's what half of it goes on. So we've got some underpinning and some kind of guarantee from government that would be the case. And 80% of international student fee income covered. If you assume half of the international student fee income goes, that's sizable, over £2 billion cross-subsidy, underwriting. Now, it's mainly loans, 75% loans, 25% grants, but government does realise the centrality of the research base. We've also, in return, agreed to limit our number of students next year to no more than 5% UK students, more than last year, which is to stabilise the system, because otherwise a number of institutions would take lots of students. But I think government has been abundantly clear that it wants the research base to thrive, and thus institutions that have got strong research which use international student fee income to support that, I think really have been well supported. The trouble is, no one knows how far it's going to go. No one knows where the bottom of this is, and I think that's the most difficult thing. But we certainly feel government has listened. You'll also be aware they've made major changes on post-study work, on 3 years now post-study work for international students. So they're listening to us. But obviously, they're in a situation where jobs are going every day of the week, and they've got companies that are going to them that might well close. Universities are not in that situation, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult in the autumn.
Now, I want to shift our attention to racism on the university campus. Now, on the 3rd of June, a group of students, myself included, came together to form a collective called the Unlearn Collective. And we wrote an open letter to both the university and the University Guild with a list of policies aimed at fostering an anti-racist culture. And I wanted to ask you, what was your reaction to the letter that we wrote to you and also the list of recommendations we made?
Okay. Well, firstly, thanks for the letter. And we have had a number of representations, as you may be aware, in the last year on this issue. And so, firstly, all of those recommendations are actively, as we speak today, being considered. A number of them were in train anyway, but a number of the suggestions, I think the most difficult one is going to be the values point, is my personal view, because this whole issue creates a lot of noise and a lot of heat. But what we want to establish more than anything else is that this has got to be a campus that does better than it's done previously, on not just responding when things have happened, but on creating an anti-racist environment. The whole point of recent events, and I wrote in an open letter to all staff and students, my personal shame as VC in 18 years. One of the things I've failed at is we've acted decisively when things have happened, but we've not been able, and I have to take responsibility for this. We've not been able to prevent racist incidents on campus. We try and act to support people when they have happened, and we act decisively with people that we can prove have undertaken things that we can genuinely consider racist. But that is an area in which the provost and our executive lead, Linda Peaker, who works on diversity and inclusion, they are absolutely committed to working with the community to come up with things about how to alter the culture that allows these things to kind of happen. Where we've found it very difficult, to be honest, in a number of the things have been anonymous, as you know, and that's difficult. But I think trying to make sure that all societies are aware of the need to be anti-racist, to try and ensure that in all our briefings and in all our orienting for new students, that in those processes, what we do is we try and make sure that the students understand the values of the institution, and we actually make it clear that we expect students and staff to adhere to those values. The difficulty is for us that there is a strong legal framework in which we have to operate, and therefore you get people coming on campus saying things invited by people who we wouldn't want on campus, but we have obligations under the law as to making sure that we promote free speech. But I think what you'll find is, in response to that letter and other events of the last year, there is going to be a continuation of a massive amount of work to make sure the campus isn't something kind of soft and liberal. It's anti-racist. The values actually try and ensure that no one feels uncomfortable because of their race, and a whole series of other protected characteristics. But it seems to me race is the area where people have felt it, that they've been able to say things, especially on anonymous chaps systems. people have said things that you just can't accept. So the letter and the interventions of lots of people, I think, have been really, really decisively helpful. And we will work with you, the signatories to that letter, the departments that have written to us, over the practical things we can do. And luckily, the letter suggested a lot of them.
Now, which specific reforms are you planning on implementing?
So I think we certainly want to work with our friends in the Guild over societies. We want to try and make sure that every society is aware of its obligations and the code of conduct under which we want to operate the institution in terms of anti-racism. We like the idea very much of training for new students that come in, awareness raising. We want to make sure that we have a discussion with the community about decolonizing the curriculum. That seems, to be honest with you, in some ways, the curriculum being decolonized is actually one of the most straightforward things, because individual members of staff have absolute freedom to teach what they want to teach. And we would strongly encourage and support those parts of the university that have been involved in decolonizing their areas to continue. But it does seem to me that trying to promote awareness of anti-racism seems to me to be the central movement that we've got to undertake, so that what we can do is make sure that every student, every staff member knows that the values of the institution are promoted. What I don't want to do is to focus on what we do if people don't follow the rules, because by the time that happens, it's too late. And that's, I think, what we've tried to do before is deal with things when they happen. And it seems to me we've actually got to try and focus on inclusion, on social justice, on providing a safe environment for everyone, regardless of race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, the lot. But what we've got to do is focus on that as the core value. And anti-racism, I think, is a very large part of it. And it's something that I think everyone in the institution would accept we haven't got right before.
Now, you mentioned there that you support the teaching of people coming into the university about tolerance and about inclusivity. But in our letter, we definitively said that we wanted to make this mandatory. Do you support making it mandatory?
I think, to be honest with you, that's something we need to discuss with the community. My personal view is we should have a series of processes whereby everyone coming in knows the values of respect and treating people in a tolerant, inclusive way. I'd be completely happy as an individual for that to be mandatory. The issue is we've got to work with the Students' Guild, with the Students' Union down in Penryn, but also with the staff and of the institution to work out whether that's what they wish to do. So what we'll do is just, and Linda Peake are going to have that discussion about the kind of training we want to put in place and the awareness raising, so we make sure that the values of the university are much more upfront than they may otherwise hitherto have been.
Because one of the reasons why we wrote the letter is because a lot of the talk around this, especially from the university, but also from the Guild and the students, tends to be quite vague. It's all about having discussions and we'll talk about this, or we'll talk with the community. That it's about pinning the university and the Guild on specific points. And I think on the issue of making diversity training mandatory, I don't see how anyone would agree with that. Okay, the content of that you can debate, but making it mandatory, I think, is pretty much essential. I mean, we've had the Bratton Law Society, we've had incidents online. It seems rather essential to me.
Yeah, I think the complication, of course, is that if you make something, if you phrase it, and this is a very personal view, I guess, if you frame it solely in terms of anti-racism, which I 100% sign up to, have no issue with, we've got to make sure that we don't lose other forms of discrimination and inclusivity. So I like the idea of everyone who comes in being made aware, everyone coming in, made aware of our policies on diversity and on inclusion, on social justice, mutual respect, tolerance, freedom of speech, all these things. I actually think everyone, or I would hope everyone, would agree with those principles. And I think that's the way to do it. And I know from discussions that I've been having in the last week with our provost that is very much on the card. So I suspect that what you'll see coming, although I'm of course leaving, as you know, I think you'll see increased training and orientation really on the issue of diversity and respect. It seems to me it's very difficult to argue with those as principles that as a university we should undertake. Whether that, to be blunt, Brian, solves the problem is going to be really difficult. But you're right, it's got to be, what we've done up to now has not. And therefore we need to try things differently that enable us to make real headroom in trying to alter the behaviour and the views of what I hope and I believe is a small number of people in the institution who really say things and do things and think things that I find incredibly objectionable.
As you say there, you are a champion of diversity and inclusion, but I wanted to ask you, you're now at the end of your tenure. Why isn't the university senior management as diverse as you'd wish it to be?
Yeah, so it's diverse in some measures, but not others. Gender is a good balance. It varies around the 40 to 50% female. Ethnicity is the big failure, and it is, having been here 18 years, with the governing body, with the senior management, we have gone out of our way. We've tried various measures to attract people from different backgrounds, underrepresented backgrounds in the institution, to apply for jobs with us. We've spent about 4 years advertising in outlets which are not the standard outlets. We now have a particular mandate with the governing body that we want to make sure we have ethnic diversity on the governing body. We've just actually are about to announce next week a person of colour to come onto the governing body, next student that we've persuaded to join the governing body. She's in her 20s, which will do something as well for age on the governing body. The truthful answer is that it's terribly difficult if you don't get applications from people, and you go out and you try and you advertise in certain journals, you in the job spec, you say things which, of course, people may think you believe, they may not think you believe. And of course, you know all this backward. The central problem, our Chancellor years ago, not the current Chancellor, Fleur Benjamin, always says that we appointed the first Afro-Caribbean female Chancellor in a British university. And we took a chance on that because there was a backlash at the time from, as she knows only too well. But we appointed her and she came in and she asked me immediately why there were so few Afro-Caribbean black students at the universities. We went and we bought all the data and we showed her the grades. And that year in particular, I think from memory, 551 from memory, Afro-Caribbean students had got the lowest grade or better that people had come into the university with in the country. So we explained that the data to her, and we've improved on that each year on student body, which I realise you're asking about staff. On student body, the numbers are, the trend is not where we want it to be, but it's considerably improving. On staff, it's been an issue that we have pretty much standardly tried to ensure that in every major interview panel, we have people from different backgrounds being interviewed. And then it's a question of who gets the job on the day. But you're absolutely right. It's recognised as something we want to alter, and it's been recognised on the governing body, and we have brought people from different ethnic backgrounds onto the governing body. It's making sure we can attract those people to come to us, which I think is something we've got to spend time on.
Now, in light of all of the racist incidents that have taken place at university, do you believe Exeter University is institutionally racist?
No, I don't believe it's institutionally racist. Do I think there are people with racist attitudes? Without any doubt, yes. But I think one of the problems is that an awful one or two people or a group of people saying things, writing things, behaving abhorrently to people, um, and there's been some very celebrated incidents of this. Firstly, I don't think that's the whole community. Everyone I work with, everyone I know in the institution is disgusted by it, offended by it, wants to do something. We spent a fortune in finances to try and find out who was behind one particular incident recently. And, you know, I wrote to the head of Facebook. I've tried to get certain pages banned. I've employed software detects where messages have been posted from. We've tried to find out, and we would have acted immediately to expel those people if we'd found out. We did not find out, and we could not find out who those individuals were. So I think there are clearly people with racist attitudes at the institution, without any doubt. In my experience, having had 18 years of talking to the student community a lot, I think the thing that embarrasses me most is that the institution gets this name of being racist in the way you're describing, because a small number of people have these viewpoints. Why do I think it's a small number? I think it's a small number because in all the social media stuff we see, there's a very small amount of material like this. Doesn't mean other people don't believe it. But the trouble is, even one racist incident is too many, which is why the university has to move away from merely saying it doesn't like racism to be actively anti-racist. Hence the point that we need to make sure that people are aware of the importance of stressing social justice, inclusion, and diversity.
Now, the most famous case in recent years of racism on our campus was in 2018 with the Bratton Law Scandal, which involved a WhatsApp group that was leaked showing racist messages being spread across a university society. And I wanted to ask you, what have been the short and long-term economic consequences of that scandal?
Well, interestingly, I've never had a discussion about the economic consequences. For us, it was entirely about views and statements and behaviors that were completely unacceptable. So we worked incredibly closely. Wendy Robinson did a major report for us, and we worked closely with the law department, closely with the Bratton Law Society, closely with the Guild on all of this. We had to root out what we saw as being a way of acting that was completely unacceptable. So do I think some students, do I think it's an economic issue? No, I don't. Do I think that some students from minority ethnic backgrounds choose not to come to law at Exeter because of that? Yes, I think that's true. But what I think is more important is trying to ensure that things like Bracton never happen again. And that was the legalities are very complicated. But we did what I considered to be absolutely the right thing. And there was a consequence to us in spending a lot of legal fees, making sure we could uphold what we did. And I'm certain that it damaged us. But to be candid, it wasn't a consideration for me about what the economic effect was. It was not even the reputational effect as much as the fact that it was damaging to the interests and identity and the feelings of a group of students and staff in the institution. And I didn't want to be part of an institution in which those views were commonplace and could be expressed in the way they were done. So money didn't come into it in any sense. It was extraordinarily offensive.
Whilst I understand that the economic consequences weren't of concern to you at the time, what my question was asking is, now, a few years after the scandal, has the university conducted any research to work out how they've been financially impacted?
No, no is the straight answer. We haven't looked at that question at all. Do you mean in terms of, just be clear what you mean. Do you mean the financial impact of what exactly?
The financial impact caused by, let's say, the lack of BAME individuals choosing to come to the university, the legal costs that it involved for the university to defend itself and defend its reputation, and also the marketing costs in trying to do damage control on this.
You're absolutely right. We know the legal. I don't know the legal figure, but there are clearly legal costs. We have attempted to market ourselves in a way, but the trouble is, Brian, you can't paper over cracks like that. You can't just say, "Oh well, we'll spend money and market our way out of it." You've got to actually deal with the issue, and the issue is that it's not the kind of institution that I think anyone I work with wants to be part of. So what we did was we felt we did the right thing. I mean, excluding those students, and we would do it again without any question. So in a way, the reason I've said we've not looked at it is simply it wasn't about money. It was about trying to do the right thing in a situation in which none of us, no one I spoke to, would have ever wanted to be in that position.
Now, looking at the university today and its future policies, how are you going to, or how is the university rather, going to make sure that any incidents of racism, sexism, or any other form of prejudice is reported and investigated in a transparent way? Is there going to be transparency in all of this?
Yes, well, there's absolute transparency, with the one obvious point which you're aware of, which is we have to be terribly careful about what we reveal without the permission of students concerned. We do, when every time we get any issue, we try and get permission from the student concerned or the staff member concerned to use the data. For example, if they get messages, can we look at their account and see where these come from? Some people don't want that revealed, so we have to be terribly careful in how we in respecting the wishes of the people involved. But I can absolutely say that anything that comes to us through Speak Out Guardians, through the harassment network, through the trade unions or the student unions, we will always be open about what we've done. Once, of course, lawyers get involved, there are then restrictions on what we can say. And crucially, we have to be terribly careful that we don't subvert justice by pronouncing people guilty without going through due process. So transparency, absolutely. And there will not be an attempt to sweep anything under the carpet, because my personal philosophy on all of this is that openness and transparency are the best ways of gaining the confidence of the community that the institution is attempting to solve the problems that are being raised.
Now, one of the issues that is rather complex to navigate is the issue of online forums. And we've seen forums such as X Honestly and Exeter rise with this anonymous element to it, anonymous posting. How is the university managing to look after students' safety and well-being? And also, because I think with these sites, let me clarify, with these sites, it's not happening under university direction. The university has no involvement with it, but you still have a responsibility to look after your students. So how are you managing that?
Yeah, well, it's a really crucial question, because on these sites, I have spent a lot of time, and we have spent a lot of time trying to get them banned. We've tried to get them taken down. We have acted immediately. We've involved the police on a number of occasions. We have, as I said earlier, employed forensic specialists to try and find where they're hosted. As you know, they can be hosted in locations and in ways that are hidden. We have not been successful in getting them automatically taken down. They have been taken down. The Guild helped us a lot in attempting to get at least one of the sites taken down. The difficulty is because they're anonymous. I mean, I don't mean this as an excuse. I just mean we're not even obvious. It's not obvious up to us that they're actually always Exeter students. Some of them clearly are, but there are other people who write to me regularly. I had a letter today calling me an overpaid simpering coward for my attitude towards supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I'd like to know who wrote that, but it's very difficult to get anonymous sites taken down. And we've been in touch with Nick Clegg at Facebook to try and get some purchase on this, tried nationally to try and get some purchase on it. As you know, it's a national phenomenon, and it's really difficult for us to deal with.
Now, moving on to a lighter subject, your handover. Professor Lisa Roberts will be taking over from you. And in the context of the global pandemic we're in, how have you been managing this handover process?
So I've been with her in a meeting for 3 hours today already. We talk all the time is the straightforward answer. She's outstanding. She's a great choice. She and I talk either on text or email, or we have phone calls pretty much a couple of times a week. So the handover, the key point is there mustn't be cigarette paper between her view and my view. So we make sure that she's happy with all the decisions that the senior team are making, that she's happy with the direction of travel, and make sure that she's come to the last 2 governing body meetings. She came to the last Senate. We're trying to make sure that she's involved in every decision, because she's going to start on the 1st of September, and she's going to have a series of issues. So we need her to be absolutely up to speed with all the concerns that the institution has got at the moment, and to get her ideas in. So we've liaised incredibly closely with her. The provost and the registrar talk to her a couple of times a week as well. So that handover has gone really well.
And I want to finally conclude with a series of quick-fire questions, and I invite you to complete the sentence. The first one, the greatest misconception about me is?
The greatest misconception about me is that I don't feel the criticism that I get. I take it very seriously.
My biggest regret is?
My biggest regret is the institution has not moved on sufficiently in terms of its attitude towards ethnicity and racism.
I'm most fearful of?
I'm most fearful of COVID-19 being the start of a series that disrupt world education.
And finally, I am proudest of?
I'm proudest of the fact that Exeter is in a fundamentally different place than it was when I came, and is now a forever institution that will remain one of the country's leading institutions, albeit with things absolutely that need to change.
Steve Smith, thank you so much for joining me on telephone.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.